Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. This is the January 20th regular board meeting of the Monterey Peninsula Airport District or the Board of Directors. And we have provisions on the website for remote public comments if you would like to make something in, and we will call for public comment before each of the agenda items. So please hold your comments to 3 minutes. And with that, I'm going to call a roll call, please.
Okay, just test the microphone here. Can they?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent.
They can hear us. Can you hear them?
No. Do you have your speaker volume up?
Mm-hmm.
I saw people shake their heads. Yes, so I know.
So you can hear us.
So I know the microphone works.
Okay. Is that live? Is that max? Why do I not have? Okay.
We have Amanda doing the roll call.
Dr. Sani?
Yes, here.
Dr. Curcio?
Here.
Dr. Sabo?
Here.
Dr. Miller?
Here.
Chair Leffel?
Here, thank you. Okay, with that, we will have the Pledge of Allegiance, if you would join me. I'm lucky I can face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to take a moment, and there is an item J, which is on our agenda. And I am going to ask for a second. I'm going to move that we move it up. It is the J1 oath of office for elected board members. And I will make that.
Second.
Okay, I hear a second from Director Miller. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Sani?
Yes.
Director Curcio?
Yes.
Director Sabo?
Yes.
Director Miller?
Yes.
Chair Leffel?
Yes, thank you. So, Mr. Huber, will you do the honors?
Absolutely. Who would like to go first?
I'll go first.
Wonderful. Would you please raise your right arm and repeat after me? I state your name.
I, Marianne Leffel,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance
That I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California.
and the Constitution of the State of California.
That I take this obligation freely
That I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
And that I will well and faithfully
And that I will and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Okay, who would like to go next? Director Sani or Sabo? Let's do ladies first. Director Sani.
Sounds good. We can go alphabetical then too. Or no, it wouldn't be. Sorry. Anyways, ladies first sounds good.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Lisa Ansani,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will faithfully,
say that one more time,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. And if I could, we're getting some feedback. If I get everybody to mute other than Director Sabo.
I was getting the feedback when my microphone was muted, and I think the only ones that weren't muted were Lisa's and Michael's.
Okay. Okay. Are you having?
There's only one speaker on.
Okay. When we don't have his on, we can't hear. They can hear us, but we can't hear them. So I have muted myself. That's what we got.
We're working on some technical difficulties.
There's another place to adjust.
So stop as long as you're muted and.
Okay. Can you hear us now?
I can hear.
Hang on.
No feedback.
Someone say something.
That's working.
Nope.
Yes, you sound clear.
Let's do this for the time being.
I'm going to jump in the other one.
Okay.
We'll just do it that way.
Okay. Mike is gonna move back to him to get the feedback.
You should be good to go.
Okay. You're still, the microphone is on.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I
Yes.
can hear you.
And no feedback, right?
No feedback.
Okay.
No feedback.
All right, Director Sabo, if you please raise your right arm.
That's my right arm. I've got it.
Repeat after me. I state your name.
I, William Sabo,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California.
that I take this obligation freely
And I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Am I in the Army now?
You are in the Army now.
Yeah. I remember the first time I took that oath. Holy. that, okay, grunts, stand over here.
And just so the record is clear, Mike has gone to his own office, so I'm taking the liberty of getting rid of my face mask.
We were not worried about you.
I don't want
So,
to be off law.
So anyway, welcome back to all board members who were kind of in limbo, in my opinion. So we are now a full board again and ready to go. I would ask for any communications, announcements, or informational items that are not on the agenda. Does staff have anything?
None from staff.
Okay. Does the board have anything? Okay, thank you. And at that point, I will ask for public comments on any item that is not on the agenda. And I see none. So we will move forward. And our next item is the seating of the chair. And Mr. Gary Curcio is our incoming chair. So Gary, I welcome you. I'd give you my seat, but you'd have to sit with Buzz. I think if there's any humor here today. I don't see any. So I will turn it over to Gary as our new chair.
Well, thank you, Director Luffel. Appreciate that. And we should just immediately move forward. Let's go to item F, which is select of Chair Pro Tem. And I make a motion that Director Miller be the next chair and Pro Tem, and call for a second.
I second that. Director Sani.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing none. Amanda, roll call vote.
Director Sani,
Yes.
Director Leffel,
Yes.
Director Sabo,
Yes.
Director Miller, Director Miller,
Carl, you're muted.
Yes.
Chair Curcio.
Yes. Very good. Motion passes. Director Miller should be Chair Pro Tem. Moving along on the agenda, our next item is appointment of committee chair by the chair, and starting with the budget and finance. I am nominating Directors Leffel and Sony. Air Service Marketing Community Relations, myself and Director Sabo. Airport Property and Leases, myself and Director Miller. Ad hoc committees, Local Jurisdiction Liaison, Director Leffel and Director Miller. Formation Commission, Director Leffel. Regional Taxi Authority, Director Leffel, Director Sani as an alternate. Transportation Agency for Monterey County, Director Sabo, Curcio alternate. Special Districts Association Liaison, Director Leffel and Director Miller. Association of Monterey Bay Area Government, Executive Director Lapierre and Director Sabo. I ask for a motion to approve.
I would move to approve.
Second,
Seconded by Miller.
any discussion? Seeing none, Amanda, roll call vote, please.
Director Sani,
Yes.
Director Leffel,
Yes.
Director Sabo,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Chair Curcio.
Yes. Moving on, our next item is our consent agenda. We have 5 items on the consent agenda. And at this time, I would ask any board member if they have the desire to pull a consent agenda item.
This is Sabo. I'd like to pull item H4.
Item 4. Thank you, Director Sabo.
Mr. Chair, I'll move for approval on items 1, 2, 3, and 5 on the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
By Miller. Seconded by Miller.
Amanda, roll call vote?
Director Sani,
Yes.
Director Leffel,
Yes.
Director Sabo,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Chair Curcio.
Yes. All right, Director Sabo, let's go directly to you and head into item 4, which are the minutes of the Air Service Committee.
Okay, let's see. I'm trying to pull it up on this. Yeah. I had some concerns that the minutes of the Air Services Committee were rather abbreviated. There were some additional items that I observed that we covered during the meeting. I thought they were important to share with the board as your advisory committee. I'll go through quickly here. I'll share this with Amanda so she can incorporate it in the minutes if you approve. I requested a noise report on the noise report. We report the weather conditions at the time of the complaint by the resident, and to clarify if the aircraft was arriving under visual or instrument rules. It's important regarding the way the NorCal is directing traffic to the airport over the west of the airport. I also inquired as to the availability of food and coffee for passengers from the new restaurant operator. And Executive Director Lapierre informed that some days food and coffee are not available from the Flyaway Cafe due to staffing and virus issues, along with the unpredictable outbound passenger counts. I also requested that staff monitor and report inbound air carrier diversions. We had one, because of the good weather we've had, we only had one, but during the marine layer times in previous years, we've had a number of diversions. I'm getting a lot of concerns from residents that they are hesitant to book out of San Jose, out of Monterey, and rather go to San Jose because they've ended up in Fresno, and that's not comfortable. So I think we ought to be paying attention to how many diversions we do get. We talked about the marketing efforts for the new Seattle service, and I suggested that maybe we ought to make use of the print media to get coverage in the Salinas Valley through the Californian and maybe even the Pine Cone for our local folks. And then finally, regarding the new service by Allegiant to Portland, I inquired as to whether or not Allegiant would receive a Monterey Airport waiver of fees for this new service, and Mike indicated that there were no subsidies. No subsidies would be offered to Allegiant, and none were requested. So that's the end of my comments, and that's all I had. I don't know whether Lisa has some.
Director Sani, any additions, Director Sani?
I don't have additions. I don't recall Executive Director Lapierre saying that service for Flyaway Cafe was impacted. I know that the gift shop was impacted by COVID and that was currently closed, but I don't think there was anything with the restaurant operations from what I recall. That's all.
Mr. Chair, the question was relative to the gift shop, not the Flyaway Cafe.
Okay, well, we can delete that. I'm doing this. I was doing that from memory, so we can delete this issue.
So is there any further discussion on this item?
I would move for approval of the minutes of Air Service with the addition, with the corrected addition.
Is there a second?
Second by Miller.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Amanda, roll call vote.
Director Sani,
Yes.
Director Leffel,
Yes.
Director Sabo,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Chair Curcio.
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, well, let's move on to item J, which is our, regular agenda, and item 1 has been taken care of. Let's move to item 2, which is overview of current instrument procedure capabilities on runway 10R/28L. And we have, I believe, Mr. Paul Hanna from Lean Engineering. Mr. Hanna, would you please make your presentation?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me at this point?
We can.
Excellent. Hi, I'll get my presentation up here in just a moment. All right, hopefully with just a few more clicks, we can get there. All right, good morning. And just a quick check, can everyone see my screen, which is currently showing the first slide of a presentation called Overview of Current Instrument Procedure Capabilities on Runway 10 Right, 28 Left?
Yes.
We can.
Excellent, thank you. All right, well, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone here this morning. I've got just a handful of slides that we've prepared to discuss, what we see is the current status of the instrument approach procedures, which have been changing over the past couple of years in almost all cases for the better. To serve air carriers and the flying community here at the airport. And also a quick overview of what we expect to see from kind of emerging technology and what that will do to the ability for aircraft to safely arrive on time into the airport. And also some remaining challenges that are preventing some of the existing instrument approach procedures from getting down to the lowest possible, weather conditions that are sometimes experienced there at the airport. So we're going to do that today in just kind of 4 quick phases. The first, we'll just take a quick moment to refresh everybody's understanding of what kind of approaches are serving the airport today, where they're coming from. I have to resist the urge to talk about them at great length. Your airport has some fantastic examples of extremely creative instrument procedure design, enough for people in my profession to talk about for hours. So we'll try to keep it a bit brief here this morning. Then we'll talk about how we think about the effectiveness of approaches relative to measuring historical weather conditions against what we see and experience from aircraft making successful arrivals on time or potentially experiencing missed approaches or diversions. Then we'll talk about just a quick section here. Oh, I'm sorry, was there a comment? My apologies, I think it's just audio feedback. Then we'll talk about the opportunities to achieve lower instrument approach minimums. And again, minimums is the term that we use in this aspect of aviation to refer to ceiling and visibility, which is what the instrument procedures are attempting to get pilots down close enough to the runway to see. And then the last, we'll be just talking about the emerging technologies that we think might help to improve the situation here at the airport. On this particular image that I have up on the screen, which is page 3, this is just a kind of a Google Earth based view of all of the approach procedures that exist into the Monterey airport at the moment. And just to be super clear, when we talk about approach procedures, we're talking about the procedure that's being used to actually help the pilot and the aircraft successfully make it to the runway. This is not the same as arrival procedures, which is what you use to get from kind of the high altitude airspace down to each of these approach procedures that you see. We're using a color coding system here. The red portions that you see, that's the final approach. The white portion is the intermediate. When you see those blue segments, that's actually kind of the initial approach, but there's a very interesting effect here at the airport where because of the existence of extensive air traffic services provided both by the tower staff that are here at the airport and by the Northern California TRACON, which is a huge traffic control unit, a lot of vectoring is used to get aircraft onto these approach procedures. So those yellowish oval shapes are kind of nominal hold procedures, but quite frequently we would expect aircraft to be vectored straight into one of the intermediate segments, which are shown there in white. What you're seeing.
Excuse me, this is Director Sabo. My screen I've got it reduced down to 50%, and I can't see anything other than the red lines and words that say overview of the approaches. It seems to have gone to huge on my screen. Is that anybody else encountering that? In other words, I can't see the screens he's talking about. I only see a portion of the screen.
Bill, I can see everything.
Okay, well, all right.
There's a button at the top that says view options. If you click.
Yeah, I used that and I got it down to 50% of the original size. And maybe, okay, I tried fit to window. That worked. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Please proceed.
Okay, no problem. I definitely want to make sure everybody has a chance to see the graphics as well. And we have provided a copy of this presentation to the airport if perhaps if there are folks who'd like to review things in more detail after our presentation here today. So just a quick refresher again, we're showing all of the approach procedures kind of in one collection here. Coming from the bottom left-hand quarter are the approaches to runway 10 right. That is where the current ILS approach that gets aircraft the closest to the runway before the pilot needs to make a decision exists. There's also an RNAV GPS approach to that runway as well. And coming in from the other direction, there's quite a few options, many of which that have been developed in part to try to find safe paths of navigation to get the aircraft and the flight crew as close to the runway as possible under inclement weather. Others that may have been sought out for potential noise abatement purposes. And just to show a little bit more detail, I'm on the next slide here, page 4. This is what it looks like when you're coming into runway 28 left at the airport. And I apologize, that's a typo there. It's not the localizer to 10 right, it's the localizer to 28 left. But you can see there are kind of different styles of approaches that serve this runway. Unfortunately, a lot of the terrain that makes Monterey and the Peninsula such a beautiful place to live also prevents a lot of the lowest approach minimum capabilities to this runway. So when we talk about, trying to find opportunities for lowering the instrument approach capabilities at the airport, really we're kind of focusing on runway 10 right because the final approach portion has the least amount of kind of terrain challenges in the way. But at the moment, there are kind of these different paths to take to the runway. And most recently, the kind of curving path that comes up the middle of the screen is the new charted visual procedure that was created through great coordination between the airport and the TRACON. So that's called the racetrack visual to 28 left. And it's intended to kind of mirror an existing RNAV RNP approach. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about the approaches on 28 left today, but I just want to make sure if there are questions, at the end of our presentation, we're happy to discuss these as well. So I just want to spend a few moments to talk about how we think about the effectiveness of these approaches in ensuring that, airlines and your business jet community and general aviation flights have a safe chance to try to execute a landing or otherwise execute a missed approach. So what we do is we're taking a look at the historical weather conditions that are coming from your on-field automated surface observation system. It's an ASOS. It's a big fancy phrase for a system that is automatically creating a lot of the weather information that the folks in the tower and the pilots use to determine, if they're going to have a successful chance at finding the runway when they get to the end of these instrument procedures. So we took a look at the last 10 years of data that comes off that system, and we parse things out into an hourly, monthly breakdown. Because in our experience, things may look great when you look at them on a yearly basis or a monthly basis, but the problem could exist at one specific hour for just a few months. And if that 1 hour of the day is when your flights need to come in, that can reflect air carriers' decisions about, their ability to serve the airport. So we want to be careful about how we think about our historical data and parse it out in that way. And what we do first is we take a look at what the winds would potentially favor in terms of the runway usage. This is our starting point. So just to provide some insight on that one, here on page 6, we first take a look at the preference to use either runway 10 right or 28 left, and then the capability of using the runway. So preference in our consideration is you know, when the winds are which direction are the winds blowing in so that a pilot doesn't experience a tailwind, and hopefully they don't have much of a crosswind. That would be kind of the normal flow when air traffic, you know, tries to point arriving and departing flights into the wind. That would be the preference. So for 10 right, you see that preference in the morning hours and in the evening, but then as we get the, you know, the onshore flows into the afternoon, 10 right is not the preferred runway, and I'm sure you all experience that on a daily basis. However, the winds aren't necessarily strong enough to take the runway out of consideration throughout the day. So when you look at the chart on the right, it is capable of being used under kind of the historical wind conditions throughout much of the day. However, when again, you see that kind of white patch in the middle there in the early afternoon, that's where the winds are typically strong enough that the airport would definitely be operating on 28 left. So aircraft would be arriving and departing to the west out over the ocean. When we look at runway 28 left itself in that same way, again, we see kind of the same relationship where, you know, the preference for 28 left would definitely be the later morning, afternoon into the early evening. But when we look at how capable runway 28 left is of being used, just from a wind perspective, it actually has the capability of being used almost all the time. The idea being that in the mornings, you know, the winds are, and in the late evenings, the winds are sometimes quite calm. Again, unfortunately, 28 left has a lot of terrain challenges that are very difficult to mitigate. So any kind of creative ideas that are coming up for instrument approaches to that runway, even though that runway could be used, you know, kind of many hours throughout the day, they're not going to, you know, we're not going to be able to solve a lot of the kind of fog challenges from a 28 left perspective using instrument procedure capabilities. So just a quick kind of comment then, once we have a picture of kind of runway preference and runway capability from the winds, we then combine that with the historical ceiling information, which is kind of how high or low the cloud deck is relative to the runway, along with the historical visibility information, which is the distance that the pilot has to see through kind of fog or rain or other conditions. That's how most instrument procedures are kind of constructed and then applied for pilots to consider when they're attempting to make their approach here to the airport. Just a very quick kind of cartoonish level way of thinking about it. So when we're getting towards trying to figure out if the airport is open or if a pilot is going to have a high chance of success of getting into the airport based on the procedures, we are looking at, you know, which direction of runway would have been available for them to consider historically, and whether there was an approach in either of those two directions that would have gotten them close enough to the runway that they would have seen it and been able to successfully execute that approach to land. So as an example here, you know, it's possible that, you know, one of the runway directions had a good approach, like the ILS to 10 right was working, and they wouldn't have attempted to go to 28 left, so it's okay, we would have assumed the airport is open. But it could be a situation where the winds did not favor 10 right, so it could have been in the afternoon when the winds were blowing quite strongly. Perhaps a storm had rolled in, and in that particular situation, we would expect that the pilot would not have been likely to come into the airport because the minimums that they had available to them for coming into 28 left wouldn't have been satisfied, and the winds didn't support the runway that did have the best minimums. And this is all kind of leading up to another table, but just you're going to see a lot of percentages. And what I want to make sure folks understand is how we correlate those percentages to real world experience. And I'm going to come back to the slide here in just a second, but page 11, this is what the situation looked like back in kind of the 2017, 2016 timeframe when we first started working with the Monterey Airport on the challenges related to instrument procedures. In truth, it was a little bit worse than this. So to give some examples, you really want to see green on this chart across as many hours of the day, as many months of the year as possible. And just another quick kind of thing to point out, when you see bold numbers on the top and the bottom, those are kind of civil nighttime periods when in principle, you know, you're in nighttime operations, or here at Monterey, the tower could be closed. And in the middle block, those are the daytime hours. Just to kind of bounce back and forth. So green is very good. That means that, you know, the pilots are historically able to land, or they're not experiencing many missed approaches because they couldn't see the runway or find the airport. That's also when you find, air carriers make decisions about scheduled service with great confidence. So anything in the green is really an hour of the day where an airline is going to make those decisions about trying to run, a constant on-time operation. When you're into the white, you're into that barrier where they're expecting things to maybe not go right all the time. And by that, we mean they're planning to potentially divert, they're carrying a bit of extra fuel. Like they know that it's, historically at that hour, at that month, things didn't go particularly well for them. And they might still continue service, or maybe they back up to something with contingency plans. When you get into the yellow territory on this chart, that's when an airline or even kind of general aviation pilots who are very experienced with the field, they know that is a challenging hour to make it into the airport at their scheduled time. And they could be expecting to divert. In some cases, airlines might be setting up provisional services, for instance. Like you got airlines that are just knowing they're gonna have to terminate passengers at San Francisco or San Jose and bus them, as a terrible example. So generally you wouldn't expect airlines to be successful at scheduling flights in those time periods. So back in 2017, this is what the airport was facing. You were looking at early morning and late evening hours of the day where you had relatively low likelihoods of flights making it in on time. And the main culprit here was a change to the minimums for the ILS approach to 10 right. And so what we did back at that time frame is we worked with the airport and the FAA to help find ways to restore that ILS approach back to standard Category 1 minimums. And standard Category 1 minimums are a 200-foot ceiling and a half a mile visibility. It can be a little bit less because you've got runway visual range sensors on the airfield, but that's a technicality. And as it turned out, some of the changes were really straightforward. There was a new obstruction survey that had been performed that the FAA hadn't taken account for. As a good example, they thought there was a giant tree in the middle of the football field here that was actually preventing the lowest possible minimums. There were also some kind of interesting procedure design things that were suggested that the FAA accomplished. And these are very kind of mechanical things that were done, but they were done successfully. And it was enough to get the airport back to where you are today, which is here on page 13. So you can see that, just by getting the ILS on 10 right back to the standard kind of Category 1 minimums, a lot of the nighttime success rate or the effectiveness of the airport improved. We got rid of a lot of the yellow. There is still a band in the early morning hours, kind of in July through September, where we do expect that pilots, be they general aviation or business jet or airline, would still find it difficult to come into the airport at the time that they want. But this did go a long way in making the picture better at nighttime. Now, one of the other things we discovered though was, we looked at different possibilities of how can we make this better? How can we get everything to green? And the answer was trying to get down to what's called Category 2 minimums. And generally, getting to Category 2 minimums can only be accomplished through an ILS, like the one you have on 10 right today. There aren't any other, there are some emerging technologies we'll talk about in a few moments, but we did reveal that if the airport had standard Category 2 minimums, you would potentially have an excellent capability to receive aircraft in the airport. So we wanted to kind of go forward and figure out what's standing in the way of getting us to these Category 2 minimums. And just a quick aside though, Category 2 minimums are generally used by airline operators today who have the correct equipment and flight crew training. Some members of the business jet community have the approval and the equipment and the training to use Category 2 approaches, but it's not universal. So I just want to, when we talk about trying to get to this state in the airport, we're not talking about everybody flying into the airport. We're really talking about a handful of business jet operators and primarily airlines that would benefit from this. Otherwise, you're looking at this kind of state today where you would expect some challenges to persist. So slide 15 is just kind of the high level list of the challenges that stand in the way of getting to Category 2 approaches and some of the mitigations that could be used to get through there. And they basically boil down to 4 kind of remaining challenges, many of which unfortunately are fairly difficult to solve. So the first one is localizer interference. The second one is going to be about the air traffic control tower. And that's not about the people inside it. It's about the physical tower itself and where it is. The third one is a really interesting, again, I'm going to try not to be diving into the weeds too much, but it's an interesting challenge about where the glide slope, which is one of the 2 components that make up an ILS, is located. And then the last one is about the missed approach climb gradient itself. And I'm just going to kind of go through this relatively quickly, but you know, the practical mitigations for some of these things and the unlimited mitigations are the way that we're thinking about this is a practical mitigation is something that would be used by any airport that kind of runs into this challenge and maybe is achievable in a reasonable amount of time, not necessarily dollars. An unlimited mitigation is something where we believe that you would probably either take a long time to get there, or it might take far more dollars and resources than the benefit is worth. But we want to call them all out so that everyone is aware and sees the picture maybe the same way we do. So the first one is the localizer interference issue. This is a problem that it's not unique to Monterey, but it's a little bit challenging here. And the problem is what you see in this picture, that device right here on the screen that looks like alternating red and white stripes, that is the localizer that serves runway 10 right. So that is that's what provides kind of left-right guidance for the aircraft as it's making an ILS approach. One of the challenges for this particular localizer and the layout of the airport is that there's an interference problem that's happening where signals coming from the localizer are bouncing off other objects on the airfield and sending the wrong message to the airplane when they get very close to the runway. So the good news is it works successfully up until the plane and the pilot gets within a half a mile of the threshold of the runway. If they try to continue using the localizer closer than that, they start to get messages that the aircraft needs to turn in the wrong direction. And that's quite a bad outcome. So the FAA has, up to this point, because they own this ILS, they've taken the decision to not allow any instrument approach to use this localizer closer than a half mile from the runway. That is a big blocker to getting Category 2 minimums, because Category 2 minimums requires that localizer be working all the way to the runway. And even a little bit on past the threshold. So one of the major challenges we have with getting to Category 2 minimums would require this challenge to be solved. And some of those solutions might involve the demolition of existing buildings, or it could involve the relocation of buildings. This is not an easy thing to solve, but if there are development plans in the future that relocate buildings, it's something that could be looked at again in the future. Another major issue that, again, we want to point out, and I apologize if the resolution on this image is a bit grainy, is we talk about the missed approaches. The challenge here is that, as I mentioned before, all the beautiful terrain that surrounds the area of Monterey makes life relatively challenging for making safe and low approaches to 28 left. It also creates the reciprocal problem for the event that a pilot needs to abort the landing or make a missed approach when they're coming into 10 right. And today, all of the missed approach procedures, which is again what the pilot would do if they didn't see the runway, they followed the approach down and they couldn't see it, they make a left turn to the north to avoid all those beautiful mountains to the east. Unfortunately, from procedure design criteria, the missed approach and the final approach are coupled together. So the closer and closer you try to get to the runway, the kind of lower and further out that big yellow surface gets, and it starts to pick up the mountains and it starts to pick up other objects on the airport, unfortunately, which gets us back to that air traffic control tower conundrum. And to get the lowest possible Category 2 minimums, the control tower would actually have to be relocated somewhere else on the airfield, which again is not an easy or inexpensive endeavor. Further afield, though, there are also additional challenges related to terrain. This is actually up kind of by Laguna Seca. But that's getting a little bit technical. So I'm going relatively quickly, but I think the challenge that we see here is that the localizer interference problem, attempting to relocate an air traffic control tower, even the location of the glide slope, the solution to that would be demolishing a taxiway and trying to move it. A lot of these things would all have to happen to get to category 2 minimums. And so our current feeling is that these are very difficult to do, and maybe beyond the cost benefit analysis that the airport or the FAA would potentially consider. There is one small opportunity, though, that does still exist, which is to try to pursue what's called a special authorization category 1 approach, which gets pilots the ability to go kind of halfway between the benefit of where you are today and category 2. That gets you to like 150 feet decision height. And so what we did was we plugged in what that would look like relative to the overall effectiveness of the airport, and you get the diagram here. So we do still see some benefit coming out of special authorization category 1. You don't completely solve the problem in the morning hours in the summertime, but it does kind of it does create some benefit there. But in general, you know, we understand many of the challenges, in particular for your airline operators, are at nighttime. And unfortunately, getting to SA Cat 1 doesn't necessarily change the picture any relative to what they're already experiencing. So it does make it a little bit better, but it maybe doesn't completely eliminate, you know, it doesn't get us to full category 2 benefits. So just a quick other thing to keep in mind about emerging technology. So there's two things that are happening in the FAA that require no investment by the airport, which could deliver some of the same benefits as trying to get to a special authorization category 1. And these are just things for your information to kind of track. One of them is this new technology and OPSPEC authorization called Enhanced Flight Vision Systems. You have some airline operators and some business jet operators today that come to Monterey that have this technology on their aircraft. Not all of them, some of them. So as an example, Horizon is starting to move this direction. SkyWest is starting to move this direction. And this is a new capability that allows pilots to use that glass display in the cockpit to enhance their vision to continue an approach towards the runway at something less than what the procedure would have let them do in the first place. So this is like, so, you know, if we can't get the FAA and we can't make the modifications on the airfield to get lower than 200 feet and a half a mile, pilots in the near future, if they have this technology, can actually go lower using this kind of enhanced flight vision system, which is allows them to kind of see through the clouds. This is kind of a neat technology, and it could enable, you know, increased access by our operators in the next 3 to 5 years. The other one that's just kind of popped up more recently is also the synthetic vision guidance system. So you may have seen pilots on the airfield that have the MPAD application and ForeFlight that lets them kind of see a virtual picture of the airport environment. This one allows them to also get kind of, it allows them to fly special authorization category 1 approaches, you know, without, you know, other equipment on board. The specific technology that's just been approved by the FAA to achieve SA Cat 1 minimums requires it to be in the flight deck. And I think you probably saw the headlines about one of the new Embraer business jets that has this. So this is likely to be available in more and more business jets in particular in the future. Again, doesn't require any airport investment and would enable more pilots to potentially get to SA Cat 1 minimums. So just a quick summary of the things that we've reviewed, and I'm sorry I probably shot out a lot of information here, but I will be available for questions here in just a moment. So we just the changes that have happened since the 2016-17 timeframe to today are resulting in, at this point, some of the best instrument approach minimums that can be achieved realistically by both the FAA's work and the airport's work on the airfield. So you're currently at 200 foot and an RVR 18, which is, you know, a little bit less than a half a mile. To try to make any additional enhancements to get down to category 2 minimums are either going to be cost prohibitive or potentially impractical in terms of the amount of things that would have to be done. As an example, one of the things we looked at is, you know, you could potentially get to category 2 by moving runway 10 right towards the ocean, which means you'd have to buy the golf course, which is virtually impractical, or if not impossible. But we do want to point out that we do expect, you know, the successful rate of aircraft arriving into Monterey to improve over the next couple of years, and it doesn't really require any investment. It just requires patience and working with operators to make sure that they're aware of these technologies and and making sure the FAA is aware of Monterey's challenges so that if anything new pops up, you can take advantage of it. So with that, I just want to be available for questions if there's something you'd like to ask about the current state of the approaches here.
So at this time, before we go to the board, I'd like to ask if there are any members of the public that would like to comment on this item. Paul, can you clear the screen? Thank you. Seeing no members of the public needing comment, I will go to Director Sabo.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that presentation. That was, I'm a instrument pilot myself, and I have had to go missed approach at 200 feet into Monterey several times, but that was a good presentation. It was like drinking out of a fire hose, though. I would be very interested in seeing your slides as soon as possible, because I was trying to follow that. My eyes got blurry. But I did have some questions, and I might point out that back in the era of 2016, 2017, very few of our air carriers had Cat 2 capability, at least for coupled approaches down to 100 feet. And now they do. Both Mesa and SkyWest have that capability, and NetJets does have that capability now. And that's what kind of stimulated my interest in this whole thing, because they've been fussing, the pilots that fly for some of these airlines quietly kind of complain to me that they don't like going to Fresno, and the passengers like it even less, you know. So that it's a deterrent to us trying to build convince our local residents to not drive to San Jose where they can get in. So that's a stimulus for this thing. I talked to the FAA avionics people, or the people that deal with the nav aids here, and I asked the question about what are the prohibitions against doing Cat 2, and they showed me the interference on the localizer. You know, they did some flight tests, had some flight test data, and it got kind of fuzzy right down at the last minute. There was some speculation. They didn't know what the answer was, but there was some speculation that the localizer antenna, which is at the opposite end of 10 right, maybe at the time that we did the runway safety area, wasn't raised up high enough, and that we're getting some interference from the runway. And I'm not trying to get overly technical, but did you examine that possibility, or do you have the capability to examine that possibility?
I can answer that question. If you have other questions, I can take notes and answer them all in one.
Okay. The other questions I had, I was really curious as to what moving the control tower has to do with the missed approach. You know, the control tower is off to the side. I don't know what involvement they have with the minimums on a Category 2 approach, or any approach actually, but you referenced that several times. And then on the EFVS, are those coupled approaches? Are they coupled right to touchdown, or are they coupled to 100 feet? I'm not familiar with that technology. So those are my three questions.
Got it. And thank you. Those are fantastic questions, and I'm glad we're here to have a chance to chat about them. Going missed at 200. Wow, that's it takes a lot of attention and skill. So, but it definitely happens. So the first question about the localizer interference, there are a couple of different possible solutions to the localizer interference issue that we understand. The most realistic culprit that we expect right now is that the buildings are the primary blocker. There's a solution to the buildings itself, which could actually be to get one of the new ultra wide array localizers. And the idea is that, you know, a current localizer, I'm just going to use my hands as an example, is about yay wide. And so, you know, you're relying on, you know, a 12 or 14 element array to kind of shoot out the signals. They just successfully showed one in Europe that's it's like 30 some wide, so it's this wide. And the idea is that there's all these different arrays that shoot them out, that shoot out the signal information. And what they can do is they can narrow the beam by which the localizer kind of shoots out its information so that it doesn't have the chance to bounce off as many objects on the airport. So the good news is there is a way to kind of change it without requiring new equipment on the aircraft or redesigning the procedure. The bad news is the FAA doesn't support that localizer yet. So it's many years away before we expect to see that one here. It's just in Germany, I think, where they successfully demonstrated it just this last year. The opportunity to raise the localizer is an interesting conundrum. So to be explicit, we did not analyze looking at raising the localizer. We do have the ability here at Lean to look at some of the more advanced localizer interference issues. I think my concern would be there are other blockers in addition to just solving the localizer problem. As an example, the glide slope needs to potentially be relocated as well. So the glide slope right now is actually, it's in its current position because there's a taxiway in the way of it, like where it would ideally be. So you have to decide between, you know, having a low threshold crossing height that's below standard for a Category 2 approach. Like right now, your TCH is 45. The typical Category 2 TCH has to be between 50 and 60. And so you'd have to try to destroy the taxiway and then back up the glide slope to a different location. So that's a bit of a challenge, but you know, if other challenges that are standing in the way of the Category 2 minimums that we showed in the table were mitigatable, like the air traffic control tower is an example, or missed approach minimums, it is possible to do a more in-depth analysis on the existing localizer to find out, you know, what other solutions there could be, including raising the elevation, but we didn't look at that explicitly. Your second question about the air traffic control tower. So right now, the Category 2 missed approach surfaces are very unique. In fact, they're different than all the other missed approach surfaces that have to be considered by the FAA for procedure design. And I'm sorry I didn't put an image in the deck. I can send one to you perhaps after our discussion today. But Category 2 missed approach surfaces look like a bowl, like a valley. And the problem is that the physical tower penetrates it. It punches through. And so there's a hard rule in the FAA that says that if you have any obstacle or object that punches through the missed approach bowl in the very beginning, then you cannot get a Category 2 approach. That's it. You got to move the threshold of the runway somewhere else so that isn't a problem, or you have to move the objects. So technically there's two things on the airfield. One of them is a cluster of trees. And I'm not here to say that we should go knocking trees down. So I'm really just focusing on the tower, because that's the next one right after, is that the tower would have to be put somewhere else on the airfield where it could both have the visibility, but get out of the way of that missed approach OCS. The third one is the EFVS. The FAA is exploring options right now to go down to 100 feet and lower, depending on what level of technology is onboard the aircraft. And the phase that they're in right now is they're looking for airlines and business jet operators that are interested in participating in the OPSPEC program to get engaged. They issue them the OPSPEC, and then they're trying to get feedback to see how it goes. The idea is that they will, on a carrier by carrier basis, provide reduced visibility credit. So to be very explicit, it's going to be unique to each operator in the next 3 years, I'd say. But after that, we would expect that to be kind of more universal and well adapted. So hopefully that answers some of your questions.
Those were good answers. At least my eyes didn't cross quite as much as they normally might. Give me an opinion, or give all of us an opinion. If we wanted to find out exactly, a little more precisely, what is causing the interference on the localizer, prohibiting us from going down to Cat 2 minimums? I'm sure that's a request to the FAA, which would take a lot of bribery and also a length of time. But do they perform flight tests or other analyses that would help us understand exactly what our problem is with that interference on the localizer, whether it's a height of the localizer or the tower interference? Is that a possible thing if we really got down on our knees and begged?
our experience on these issues, and we do help a lot of airports in this specific region of the FAA, which is the Western Service Area, with these challenges. The FAA's ability to analyze that particular problem you're identifying is limited. Either they or others performing the analysis typically have to contract out a more sophisticated level of scientific study to determine those challenges. And I'll be really explicit. The FAA has access to one particular software tool that helps them with sighting localizers and glide slopes. It does not help them identify, complicated three-dimensional interference level technologies. They have two solutions to that problem. One is they contract out that analysis to a third party, or like you suggesting, they spend a lot of time in flight test and evaluation. The problem is that we know you've already got interference issues. So I think the flight test solution isn't going to solve anything, because there's a firm belief that it's the buildings on the airport that are causing the problem. And so to do this in the flight test method, you have to move a building, or you'd have to shield a building or something. It's very complicated and cost prohibitive. So if the only option I think that remains is for the FAA to try to contract to a third party to do the analysis, or you could consider, directly contracting for that analysis yourselves. I just want to caution, there's a lot of other things that stand in the way. Like once you solve the localizer, there would still be these other things in the table you'd have to solve. So just
okay. I guess one of the things that stimulated me was noticing that there were smaller airports in Oregon, and also Stockton has an SA, Cat 2 SA. They don't have quite the obstacle clearance problems that we do for missed approaches, but money was invested, I think, by the FAA to get approaches into these smaller airports where they have air carrier service, but it's very limited. And given that it has a definite impact on our ability to compete with San Jose, I wanted to make sure that we clearly understood what our options were and set a path going forward based upon new technology like you've identified. I think it's going to be very important for us to be able to attract new air carriers. And we got a lot of horsepower with some rather influential people that fly corporate jets in here, and they are getting Cat 2 capabilities right down to a couple Cat 2 capabilities right to touchdown. They're getting those things. And so I think it's what you presented to us is something that we need to bear in mind going forward for our future out here, because that's going to be a big item for an air carrier to select Monterey as a possibility. So thank you very much for that, and please share those slides as soon as you can with our executive director so he can share them with us. Okay, thank you.
Director Leffel, any questions?
I have none. I'm good.
Director Miller?
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Very interesting presentation. Paul, years ago, I heard that our tower, FAA, does have long-range plans to relocate the tower. Are you aware of any timelines with that? And it was going to go more on the north side, eastward bound.
I'm not aware of the timelines. I had heard that there were thoughts about that, though my understanding is that the relocation of the tower wasn't necessarily related to the approach procedure challenge that we're identifying. It was for other reasons, but I assume.
I was told it was because of there's an obstacle that prevents them from seeing part of the runway on the east side of the runway.
I have a similar understanding, but I would defer to Mike or Chris, who I suspect know much more about possible timelines on that.
So you don't know of any time, don't they plan these things out years in advance if they're going to build a tower somewhere?
You're absolutely right. It's a huge undertaking for an FAA tower to be relocated and constructed. But I have to say my focus is to us, the tower, it becomes just a cylinder that's kind of in the way of an effective instrument approach procedure. So I would turn to Chris and Mike to understand if they've gotten any new insight on that.
Director, to date, we've not heard anything from FAA about plans to relocate. It is not in their 5-year plan.
Okay. Thank you. But it does sound like, Paul, there are technology solutions for this interference, which you would think would be the easier thing rather than tearing down buildings. Any timeline on that, when that may become practical or being considered by FAA?
In our experience, so it's a very good question, and that's why I kind of hesitate to answer. The FAA attempts to apply kind of value-based engineering wherever it can, especially in their nav aids that they own and maintain. And what we mean by that is they try to buy just one or maybe two different models of an ILS so that they can deploy them kind of throughout all the airports that might need the parts and the training and the maintenance. So this new localizer array that's being implemented in Germany, it could be quite some time before the FAA decides to make that an option that's available for US airports and specifically in the service area. So for me, I would not expect to see that in the FAA's inventory for at least 5 years, if not more. I mean, there are other solutions to potentially take on such nav aids, as an airport owned, which is called the FAA third party or the non-federal nav aid program. There are a lot of challenges associated with that. In our opinion, if you have an FAA owned nav aid today, it's probably in your best interest to keep it that way. So we would expect 5 years or much longer before you could see a different kind of localizer available to solve the problem.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Director Sani?
I don't have any questions. Thank you for the informational presentation.
I have no questions either, Paul, but a big thank you for the presentation. Really well done. Tried to get some of us novices to be able to get in the loop on it, and it's helpful. I would remind Executive Director Lapierre to please get the PowerPoint out to all of the board members. We would appreciate that. And again, Paul, thanks for being here today. We appreciate it.
It's our pleasure. It's great to be with everybody here this morning in these historic times. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So we'll move on to item 3, which is Resolution 1792, a resolution approving the FY 2021 Airport Capital Improvement Plan. And Executive Director, who's going to take that on?
Let me tee it up. This is our annual exercise with FAA. It is typically a 5-year rolling program of capital improvements. It's a planning document that we're required to provide to FAA for their planning exercises as well. And Chris Morello will take you through the ACIP itself.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to present on this Resolution 1792. So as Executive Director Lapierre has stated, this is a requirement by FAA that we present our 5-year program needs that might need federal support and funding out of the Airport Improvement Program. It also was a requirement under Caltrans Division of Aeronautics that we include this on their list as well. Every 2 years, we have to submit this list. And this is the biannual year to put this onto the Caltrans Division of Aeronautics website as well. This allows FAA to program in for the near and long-term future, and especially each airport district office. Ours is San Francisco. We're part of the Western Pacific region out of LA, and this allows them to navigate and push for funding for their airports, and it allows the region to go to Washington, D.C. and provide the legislators with the information on needs for funding for capital improvement programs at airports. So this 5-year. We actually have moved this a little bit further than 5 so that we are incorporating the recently approved safety enhancement project for taxiway A relocation and the associated demolition and relocation of the general aviation facilities at the airport in its entirety. And that was the environmental assessment and the FONSI FAA approved this past June of 2020. So we have identified the program out into 2028 for those components. Those are the colored components that are on the Excel two-sided page that you have in your packet. And we have focused them into 4 components, phases A through phase D. And phase D is the ultimate relocation of that taxiway as studied under the EA. In addition, we've added a few other projects that we believe are important here at the airport for maintenance. One is a pavement treatment on our main runway, 10 right to 8 left. Another is the potential of a land acquisition similar to Fenton and Keller. It allows us to protect the airspace around the airport. And the final other project that is not part of the safety enhancement is a purchase of a new ARF vehicle. Our ARF vehicle is coming up on 14 years old. And FAA's requirement or does participate in funding of a new ARF vehicle when it's about 15 years old. So with that, we have had discussions with FAA. This again is an annual. We have to submit this. It is a requirement that we submit this to FAA, and annually the board adopts this. There is no project on this list right now that is moving forward. That comes in the form of a capital improvement budget to the board. Every year when we bring our budget, we bring our capital improvement program, and that's when the board adopts the actual projects and the funding. This right now is a planning exercise so that FAA can identify the funding needs, A, for our airport, this region as a whole. With that, I would entertain any questions and ask that you support Resolution 1792.
Okay, before we take it to the board, I'd like to go out to the public. Is there anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this? If so, please raise your hand. Amanda, anyone?
I do not see any hands up.
Very good. So we're going to go back to the board, and what I'd like to do is just rotate our questioning. So Director Sabo, if you put your hand down, I'll be getting to you shortly. And we'd like to start this with Director Soni.
My one question is, we've got on year 2025, it looks like it's the same thing. It's just the project cost is either the high range or the low range. Is that my understanding? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. It seemed that way. So I just wasn't sure because everything else is aggregated on it. I don't think I have any other questions. I appreciate, the time and effort that went into creating the document and keeping everything abreast. Thank you.
Director Miller.
Thank you. And I have no questions. Thank you, staff, for putting that together.
Very good. Director Leffel.
Just on behalf of the Finance Committee, Director Curcio and myself, we went into this in depth and we are giving a recommendation for approval out of the Finance Committee, and I have no questions.
Director Sabo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did have some questions. I know that's a shock to you, but because I didn't, Chris, because I didn't quite follow everything you were saying, could you explain the difference between these different colors, A, B, C, and D? What's the difference between those things, and what are the implications for our approval?
The difference is that we've grouped them into process steps. So to move the taxiway, to get to the last project of that safety enhancement, the project, and moving taxiway alpha, it is a domino effect of different projects that have to happen. And for funding purposes with FAA, an ability for them to either give us more or less as they have money available, we have grouped them into a process. And phase A has to happen before we can get to phase B. Phase A and B have to happen before we can get to phase C. And all three of those have to happen before we can move that taxiway. And that's how we've grouped them that way, and I've grouped them that way for the ability for FAA to fund them either in whole or in part, depending upon what's available for money.
Okay, so we're not indicating a priority or a level of importance on any particular project, but with this color coding and this ABCD business, it's more a sequencing for funding. Is that right?
It's a sequencing for construction. A, you cannot get to phase D before you do the other three. So
okay.
It's sequencing for getting to the final component of the project.
Okay, I get it. Thank you for explaining that to me. I had another question about item 3 under 2021. And that was the south side land acquisition of 4.4 acres. I went back into the master plan and scratched my memory. Maybe everybody else remembers, but I don't remember any discussion of acquiring land. What is that?
Director, that is land that may come available. It's preparatory for it becoming available on the south side. It's land that's adjacent to the airport property and would make wise sense for us to purchase. It is programming only. There have been no movements toward its acquisition. But in order for us to begin the discussions with FAA about helping us fund that acquisition, it needs to be part of the ASIP.
Okay, what would that do for our project by acquiring that land? Is it a safety thing or what?
There are safety components associated with it. Yes, it is not related directly to the overall safety enhancement program. It is adjunct to that.
Okay, if we don't get that money to acquire 4.4 acres, does that prohibit us from proceeding on any other portion of the project?
It does not.
Okay. All right, and I don't know whether this is the appropriate point to ask this question, Mr. Chairman. Maybe you can stop me. The resolution does have some words in it that I don't understand, even though I've seen it probably a million times in here. So I have questions about the resolution. Should I ask that now or hold that for later?
No, I think you should ask that now. That's fine. And Executive Director, will you please respond?
Okay, and this may be for Scott too. And that is, and again, this is something we've done before, but I'm not sure I ever really understood it, but we're authorizing the Executive Director to submit all future documents necessary to implement this whole program here. And further, we're authorizing him to, on such grant agreements and amendments executed by the Executive Director are hereby approved as set forth in full. What does that mean to us as the board? I understand we'll always get to approve construction contracts and all that, but what are we really authorizing the Executive Director to do with this resolution, Scott?
Scott, you're muted. I'm pleased I'm not the only one that does that on a constant basis.
This happens to me. Yeah, it seems like it's happening more frequently to me as I continue to get dominated by these Zoom meetings. Director Sabo, this is literally authorizing just the submission of this item. That's it. You're not authorizing more than that. You're literally authorizing the submission of this item to the FAA.
Just the submission, but not accepting the grants. Is that true? Can the executive director or anybody else accept the grants with this resolution?
We can apply for the grants director, which you're authorizing me to do.
Okay.
Acceptance of the grant the grant will only come after we get the bids in hand and the construction contracts presented to you. That's when the grant becomes available to us. So it's a timing issue. If you're concerned that I would have the ability to accept grant dollars on your behalf without further authorization, that would be incorrect.
Okay. No, there was no suggestion that you would do anything untoward. It was more, I'm just trying to understand these words that we do on every year when we do this ACIP submission to the FAA.
These are standard words, Director. They're in every resolution of this nature. It allows us to do what we need to do with FAA to get you to the point where you have a grant award available to you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I have no further questions.
At that, I would call for a motion to approve Resolution 1792.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Seconded by Miller.
First Leffel, second Miller. Amanda, roll call, please.
Director Tani?
Approve.
Director Leffel?
Yes.
Director Sabo?
Yes.
Director Miller?
Yes.
Chair Curcio?
Yes. Motion carries. With that, we will move on to item 4, which is a presentation review of cost per employment metric. Executive Director, who's going to put that up?
This is a request from Director Sabo to review with you a very common metric in the airline industry, which is called cost per enplaned passenger. I've asked Tim Burkholz to do that. I'll provide a little color as necessary.
Morning. The cost per employment for the airport, it's a very straightforward calculation, as you may have heard in the past. The components of expenses. Next slide, please. The cost components in the calculation for cost per enplaned passenger include all the airside, the landing fees, apron fees, RON fees, fuel flow fees, and then we have the terminal side or land side, which includes the terminal rents, hold rooms, baggage claim, and those other expenses that are allocated, utilities to the airlines per their leases. So we really have two components. One's a little bit variable, the air side, and the other is relatively fixed in nature. And that's the expense side of the equation. The employments, it's the number of passengers in a given period or in a fiscal year that determine the denominator, and the numerator is obviously the expenses. The CPE metric is something that is used by the airlines and the financial industry. Really, it's a key to, does it make sense to do business with your airport? Again, it's something that they bench all of us against. You hear of things that happen at airports that drive their costs up or their employments fall, and it starts to make the airlines question whether it's practical to do business with that particular airport. Again, the model's simple. And let's go ahead and look at some historical information on the next slide, please. When you look at the Monterey Airport for fiscal year 16 through fiscal year 21, you see a variety of rates. And really, again, the terminal side expenses are relatively fixed. Landing fees are variable a little bit. And then the big determiner is what's the total employment. So you see some oscillations in the rate for each of those fiscal years. And really the big determiner is the number of employments. When you bench it against other airports, and which is what the airlines do, they see how you stack up in controlling your expenses and how you deliver your passengers to the airport. And when you look at the neighboring airports, Fresno, Palm Springs, Santa Rosa, which is a kind of an eye-opener at $1.49 per in-plane passenger, Sacramento at 11, San Jose at just under 10, and San Luis Obispo pretty close to where we are. You kind of get a flavor for how well the airports are controlling these expenses. Again, it's a fairly straightforward metric. It's used in the industry, and it looks like we're doing a fairly good job of stacking up against our neighboring airports. So again, we're not seeing that as a deterrent for the airlines to do business with us. That's really it.
I do want one point of clarification. We in our world refer to it as CEP, as the slide indicated. The common metric in the industry, so that we are consistent, is CPE. Means the same thing, but I didn't want you to get confused. I think one of the keys here that we need to understand is that, as Kim said, there are two basic components to calculating CPE, and that's the costs assigned to the airlines and the number of enplanements. Then in that mishmash, in that soup, we come out with CPE. Since 2016, we have not raised the airline rates and charges that are applicable to the airlines. We have done adjustments to rent. That's per agreement. Those are consistent with what we would have approved previously with the agreements. So we've done what we can do to hold the line on our costs, and it is reflected in the historical information that we've provided here. It's interesting to note that if we went back to 2016 and compared our numbers then to what our competing airports would see, we were at the top or a little bit above the top in almost every metric, with the exception of enplanements. We've held the line. We've actually started to reduce our CPE to get ourselves more in line with what we consider our competition in the Central and Northern California region. We've done that by judiciously making sure that we keep our costs down. We have not changed how we calculate airline costs. So we've done that through good management practices. And that's been by intent, knowing that air service is integral to the future financial ability of this airport. We wanted to make sure that we were at market or below market in comparison to some of the other airports in the region. And I will tell you that when I first got here, the question from the airlines came about our cost per plane passenger. Why is it so high? We don't get those questions anymore. They look at our CPE and they are very satisfied with our performance. That gives us the flexibility at some point in the future, should we move forward with other projects, to adjust our CPE as needed. So we lost in 15, we did not have the ability to adjust our CPE further without impacting our relationships with the airlines. We now have some ability to do that should we need to. We've also positioned the airport financially so that we're less dependent on the CPE or what we charge the airlines to balance our books. We've done that through careful management of expenses, through increased and enhanced non-aeronautical revenue development, and that's allowed us to keep our CPE what now is at or maybe slightly below market level. That's just a little bit of additional background for you on this slide and how we view CPs.
Is that the end of the presentation?
That is it.
Okay. Can you remove the slide, please? Thank you. Before we go to the board, I'd like to take it out to the public. Does any member of the public have a comment on this item? So indicate by raising your hand. Amanda, do we have anyone? Okay. Let's go to the board, and let's start with Director Leffel.
Thank you, Ms. Curcio. So that last slide, if you could put it up for a second. So the fiscal year 21 to date looks really good, but is that in part because we're not charging the airlines any terminal rent during COVID?
That's partially the calculation, yes.
Okay, so if we were to really look at this, maybe more of a comparison, we probably need to look at 20, where we had at least some partial expenses to the airlines that we don't have now. Would that be correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And of these people that you compared us with, are they abating the rent to the airlines? I'm guessing Santa Rosa is, but what about the others?
I don't know.
Yeah, almost everyone on the list is not abating, they are deferring. So they're still asking the airlines to pay them in the future for rents today. We are not taking that approach.
Okay. And part of our success was also, I think, when the FBO, when the, I forget the name of it, Monterey Fuel Company lowered the rates of their fuel. Is that correct?
That's not calculated in our CPE, but certainly that has an impact in our discussions with the airlines, yes.
Okay, so our fuel flowage fee is, didn't we add a nickel last year, the year before?
We did. We put a nickel on about, I think we're in the second year of that, and that would impact the revenues and the costs to the airline, but
right.
The actual fees that they pay, that an airline would pay to Monterey Fuel Company itself for fuel, are not calculated in this.
Okay, I'm just trying to look at this fairly, and I'm thinking 21 is, I'm not sure we can use 21.
Yeah. And I think that's reasonable and fair. It's a very unusual year. We don't even yet know where that $7.10 will end up at the end of our fiscal year.
Yeah, I mean, I know it makes us look good, but I'm not sure. So have you looked at what the airside usage charges are in some of these other terminals?
In terms of landing fees and rents and things of that nature? We have done that in the past. We did not do that exercise this year as part of the budget. We did that a year ago in the previous one.
Okay. And then obviously it's divided by in-plane passengers. And I think I read in San Jose that one of the things that's killing San Jose right now is their drop in passengers, that their CPEP was going to go up considerably. I can't remember what the number was, but it was pretty eye-popping because of the drop in there in plane passengers. So I don't know. I'm grateful for this, but it's kind of like anything right now. I'm like, is it what we should be looking at? I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and you're absolutely correct. There are some underpinnings here too. There are a couple of ways that an airport and an airline can have a relationship financially. Simplistically, there is one that's called residual, and that's where rates and charges are set by the board or by the governing body by ordinance, which is what we do. There is, I'm sorry, that's compensatory. Compensatory is rates and charges set. Residual is where we would calculate our budget. The airlines would approve that budget, and then they would make up any shortfall in approved categories that we would experience throughout the year. So that's not a model that would work at an airport this size, particularly when we're trying very hard to retain and grow air service.
Okay, well, I'd like to see this maybe on an annual basis and just kind of keep track of it. Obviously, if we all suffer from, well, we're all going to suffer at least part of this year for the additional COVID, and then it might be interesting to see how we shape up after that. The first airport conference I ever attended, it had CEOs from 4 of the major airlines. And one of the things that they said, and it stuck with me, is we're such an anomaly, being the fact that we're not attached to a city or a county. So we are not, our monies are not being used to balance the budget of any type of a general fund for a city or a county. So we're actually in a lot better shape being able to set our own rates and fees and see what we do and run it as a business. So thank you for this.
Director Miller.
Yeah, thank you. I was thinking the same thing as Director Leffel said. Our employment numbers being way down, that 710 is a pretty good number. Tim, is that an accurate number for Santa Rosa? Are they subsidizing? Are they actually giving cash to the airlines to lower that number?
I suspect, and I don't know for a fact, I haven't made that inquiry, but Executive Director and I discussed the only way they could drive that number down is they must be getting subsidized from the county. They're technically owned by the county, and also their facilities are very modest. So they maybe are just have a lot of costs that have already been absorbed in other ways. And so they're just not putting that in the calculation because that is an anomaly.
So this 710 number, it's the question Director Leffel asked, and I don't know if you or our Executive Director responded, but that is taken into account the rent forgiveness that we have given?
It's the rent forgiveness is not included in there. That's the costs we are charging. So you probably it's probably low simply by the rate we are charging. If we added it back, it would probably be close to the $10 that you see in fiscal 18. And we could do that as a residual or as a follow-up calculation.
This is a matrix that the airlines look at, but there also is a second matrix that is their returns on investment or what they're charging for shares that doesn't take into account here, right?
No, it's not taken into account.
Do we know how we rate there as far as their returns flying out, or is that something they keep pretty proprietary?
They keep that very proprietary. Once in a while, they will tell us that, or we'll pick up through sources that comment about our profitability or lack thereof. And the limited amount that we've been exposed to it, the airlines seem to like us right now because we are profitable for them. American in particular has expressed their pleasure with our performance to Dallas. That's a profitable route for them. Denver, the same for United.
Okay, very good. I agree. This is always useful information. I'd like to see it on an annual basis too. Thank you for putting it together.
Director Sabo.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got confused, Tim, on what you just said about FY21, that $7.10 figure. Previously, I thought that it reflected the fact that we were reducing the collections from the airlines for rent, that we were abating the rent.
That's correct. So if you have a lower bill to the airport, that will drive down the cost. So,
okay.
So it's there, what we charge the airlines.
Okay, so 710 is legitimate based upon what we're actually billing the airlines right
Correct.
now. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, I understand now. You know, I'm kind of interested in this from the standpoint of the airports that we're comparing ourselves to, Sacramento and San Jose, which seem to have fairly high CPEs, and that's my guess is that's due to the debt load that they're carrying. Sacramento and San Jose both had rather dramatic debt issuances in order to support the construction of new terminals and so forth. In your opinion, if we have to issue debt in order to cover our master plan projects out here, will that be reflected in the rates and charges that we charge to the airlines?
It depends totally and solely on what debt we would issue. If it is revenue-based debt, say for instance, monetizing our passenger facility charges, no, that would not have any impact here. If we issued general obligation debt, which would require a referendum or something of that nature, which we cannot currently do, then that would potentially have an impact there. But remember that these are charges to the airlines, and right now we do not, in our rates and charges equation, we do not charge them for debt service. In the case of Sacramento, I can tell you that they do. I have personal experience there. My assumption, although I cannot be 100% positive, but I'm 95% positive that San Jose does as well.
Okay, so what I understood, you just said that if in fact we have let's say a $50 million bond issue, and it doesn't go to the general public, it's our own issuance, then we would not add that debt service and interest charges onto our rates and charges for the airlines that are using that new terminal. Is that true?
If they are PFC backed, that is not a charge to the airlines. If it is revenue backed and you use revenues from airline operations to help pay for a debt service, then it would. Was that a little more clear? I'm sorry.
Okay. I don't. We haven't had a presentation on the financial options available to us, so I don't necessarily know what the level of magnitude is in financing any kind of future debt obligations that we have with PFCs only. But if in fact PFCs, the projected PFCs going forward are not sufficient to cover the debt, then I guess it would become an obligation of the airport fund, if you will. In other words, a cost that we have to cover. Is that true?
That is correct. And that is a question you want to hold in your pocket until we get to that point. But if we issue revenue-backed bonds that are not supported solely and totally by PFCs, then that could have an impact on this number, yes.
Okay, all right. And it is your understanding, Mike, that the airlines do consider the CPE as in their consideration of serving a particular airport. And ours, it apparently, it's not high enough to discourage them, but they do consider it. Is that true?
It is one of the factors that they certainly calculate in their equation, yes, without question.
Okay, all right. This is just an aside. San Luis Obispo did do a new terminal down there, or a terminal upgrade. Do you know how they financed that terminal upgrade to end up with $8.29?
That was an amalgam of a number of sources. Some were grants, some were PFC-backed bonds, some were iBank bonds. I do not know the level to which they adjusted their rates and charges for the airlines to have an impact on their CPE.
Okay.
I don't know the impact of that funding mechanisms they used.
Okay. Well, thank you. I think this is an excellent chart, and I think we ought to peek in on it regularly so that we know where we stand relative to some of our competitors. Thank you. I'm done, Mr. Chairman.
Director Sani.
Thank you, Chair. Most of my questions were answered or were asked already. My one remaining is, I'm just wondering, since we're really kind of saying we shouldn't be looking at fiscal year 21 with all that's going on with COVID, the difference, the $1.50 decrease from year 19 to year 20, fiscal year 20, do we have a understanding of why that was? What accumulated to $1.50 in savings?
Principally, that was an increase in the number of employments.
Employments. Okay, yeah. That's what I was thinking, but wanted to know if we had looked into it. That's all. More butts in the seats, as we say, right?
There you go, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Thanks, Tim. And can you clear the screen, please? Thank you. So we're going to go on to item 5, status of Navy Flying Club. Executive Director, who's going to take that?
I think Tim and I will, since we're both involved in that, we'll kind of tag team this. I can tell you that that the Navy Flying Club has reached an agreement in principle with Monterey Jet Center or Del Monte Aviation to take occupancy of space in the old GEM hangar, so they have a new home on airport. Tim can give you the update on where we're at in terms of their vacancy of the former Navy Flying Club facilities on the north side.
As of today, clarify, the Monterey Navy Flying Club no longer exists. It has been transitioned to the Monterey Navy Flying Club Auxiliary, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And so really the previous club really doesn't exist as an entity anymore. It's now more in a private mode and with a small number of members. We've been communicating with the representative from MWR about exiting the facilities. As of Monday morning, all of the cards for access to the Monterey Navy Flying Club ramp were terminated. Over the weekend, they were exiting property or items off the property to the southeast ramp or other locations. The representative, or Kyle Rodas from MWR, this morning reached out to ask for a checkout. Apparently they're in the final stages of clearing the property. And at the end of this month, they're going to coordinate with the properties, I believe Patricia, to do a final walkthrough, and then the facility will be turned over to the airport. There will be 3 remaining assets: the hangar, the fuel tank, and the trailer. And I know those items are in consideration of development of the northeast ramp, of which will be removed and disposed of or dismantled, and what might stay. So, and Chris could probably answer a little more on that phase of the Monterey Navy Flying Club.
Chris, anything?
Tim is correct that the removal of those items was part of the plans and specs for the ramp. So those items have been included in the contract that you lended to Tigert Construction back in December. So that is covered under the grant funds.
Very good. So before we go to the board, I'd like to go out to the public because I know Matt is available and maybe he might want to make some comment on any of this. So let's go to the public first. Yeah, we have one hand up. It is Matt Wright. Okay, Matt, take it away. You're up.
Hey guys, good morning. Congratulations to the 3 board members that were reelected, and congratulations to you, Chair Curcio, on your appointment. And best of luck. I look forward to working with you guys through the coming years. So, Navy Flying Club, yes, we have made interim arrangements with the new what I understand is to be a nonprofit organization of former members of the Navy Flying Club that is not affiliated with the Navy. I'm not sure what their name is going to be, but we have moved them over to the Southeast GA ramp in what we affectionately call the gem hangar, which is where our avionics shop is, and the maintenance provider. So they were very pleased with that availability. We want to promote those guys and support them in whatever way that we can. So we did do a pretty agreeable rental arrangement for both office and ramp tie down space. As far as any of the remaining assets over on the north side that we can assist with and dispose, we're interested in the tank over there. It is a as it currently is configured, it's not really safe or doesn't meet the standards for what we would ever want to hold out for, like a self-service or 100 low lead storage tank. But we are interested in that, although it's not clear to me at this point who exactly owns it or what the next steps are. But we'd be happy to have those discussions with whomever that is at whatever point that makes sense. So we'll continue to support the folks of the former Navy Flying Club in whatever capacity they've got, and just like we continue to support general aviation as a whole on the airport, and look forward to working together with those guys. So happy to answer any questions that board members might have, but that's current status.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Executive Director Lapierre, is it appropriate, because this is under public comment, is it appropriate for the board members if they have questions to ask?
Sure, certainly. That's the pleasure of the board.
Okay. Before we let Matt go, are there any of the board members that might have a question for Matt? Seeing none, we thank you, Matt. Appreciate your help on this, and we'll. Do any board members have any further questions on this topic this time?
I do, Mr. Chairman. Mike, when is the contractor going to start scraping that area where the fuel tank and the hangar and the trailer are? When does that happen?
We have signed contracts. The board approved those. They are fully signed and executed. My understanding is that he's waiting until we get through whatever rainy season we might have, which would have us probably in the March, early April timeframe.
Okay. And have we reissued any badges for the members of this new entity? Are we facilitating their movement into the South Side facilities?
As they become new tenants of the GEM hangar, certainly their ID badges will be adjusted so that they have access.
Okay. Are they, Matt? Are they currently occupying those facilities, or is that something that's still being contemplated? Matt, right?
Don't believe he's.
Okay, maybe he's gone. Okay,
he's there.
No, I'm here. Sorry, I was muted. Currently, they've moved all of their personal belongings into that gym hangar. And I think that my understanding is that they have some like logistical formational issues that they need to work through before they actually start operating their club out of that location. So, like I said before, Bill or Director Sabo, we fully support the group formerly known as Navy Flying Club, and we'll make whatever arrangements that make sense for Monterey Fuel Company as well as Navy Flying Club, former Navy Flying Club, to continue their group.
Okay, well, thank you for helping come to some accommodation of those folks that were members of the Navy Flying Club. Needless to say, this is quite traumatic for them. There's some real dedicated folks that are part of that club. And now that they have a new structure, anything that we can do to, as an airport, to facilitate and accommodate and ease their acquisition or movement into the new facility and their operation, including badges and stuff like that, would certainly be appreciated. Thank you.
So before we move on, I'd like to make a recommendation. We have a hard stop at 11 o'clock. I suggest that we take a 5-minute break and come back in closed session at 11 o'clock.
Very good.
Does that work?
That's
Everybody good with that?
Sounds good.
Yep.
Okay, see you back at 11 on the other Zoom link. Thanks, everybody. All right, let's go back to, I'm sorry, Chris, you have a question? Your hand is up. Okay. All right, we'll go back to open session. Scott, I believe there is nothing to report from closed session. Is that accurate?
There was no reportable action taken in closed session. That's correct.
Thank you. So let's move on to item K, which is board committee reports and acceptance of department heads. So I just want to try to keep us on these topics. I would like to try to keep our questions to 3 minutes on each committee per person, just to try to keep the meetings moving along as best we can. So I'd like to adhere to that. And as far as the staff reports and department reports, I'd like to ask if any board member has any questions on to any of the department reports. And in asking that, I also say, please save questions related to standing committee reports until we come to those. So at this point, does any director have any questions of the staff on the department reports?
Yes.
Go ahead, Bill.
This is mostly for just information. I noticed that the police report had a unattended luggage item.
Bill, hang on 1 second. Somebody's phone is ringing. Can we get everybody on mute except for Bill? Or maybe it was Bill. Yeah, okay.
It was
still
Bill.
Everybody muted except when you're talking.
Yeah,
thanks,
well,
Bill.
It was one of those spam calls, So anyhow, what is our practice here relative to the police finding unattended luggage? What the police report simply said that they found the luggage and they returned it to Lost and Found. Are they authorized, or do they actually go through the luggage to make sure that it isn't doesn't contain a bomb or something like that?
To answer specifically, we'd have to do that offline, Director. That's not something we can discuss in specific in a public forum like this because it's part of the security plan for the airport. The short of it is the police will respond to the bag and they'll administer its its completion, whether that is returned to its owner or further actions related to determining the outcome.
Okay. I will maybe chat with you offline because that was, it's happened before, I guess, where there have been explosives in luggage that was left behind. And so I was concerned about that. I had a question on the financials.
So Bill,
yeah.
Can we wait until we get to the financial committee report?
Well, I don't know. This is a question for the staff. I don't know. We can put it in the financial committee if you want. I don't know.
Go ahead, Bill, ask the question.
Okay. There was an item, I don't have the detailed financials, I just have the summary. There was an expense item for office rentals of $8,000 versus a budgeted of $104,000. What is that? What is the office rentals item, which is significantly below budgeted?
Tim, you're muted. Tim, you want to unmute?
Yeah,
there you go.
Trying to get it done. Bill, that is related to the 2801 properties and their associated revenues. I can call up the variance report if you'd like me to look at it specifically.
Well, I looked at the variance report. I really didn't see too much on that particular item. It's an expense item, some money that we didn't spend. Is that a deferral of maintenance or something like that?
No, on that particular property, we had expenses for elevator repairs and other things we had estimated. We're still in the learning phase on that facility. We've had to do a variety of repairs. We've also done upgrades on lighting, which is saving us some expenses on replacing light bulbs and doing those types of things. So again, I'm just looking at the office facility expenses, and let's see here. We saved some money on repairs this month. We also had contract services for janitorial. Actually, this is kind of interesting. Fenton and Keller thought we were doing such a good job that of managing their expenses that they asked to take over the janitorial service. And part of that was because of COVID-19. They wanted to make sure that the place was being cleaned extra. So they've taken over that expense. So we're saving that money each month. And then property taxes, $77,000. Interesting scenario, and I wasn't aware of this. We cannot have possessory taxes billed directly to the airport. We filled out paperwork to request that. Didn't know they couldn't do that at the county level. So we're in the process of working out the details with the county, specifically the possessory tax department, to have them be able to get the bills to us expeditiously. We need to share that information with the tenants because they will actually, the bill will be in their name. But by contract, they can't be billed. We have to pay for it as the airport by contract.
Okay, so bottom line, that we budgeted for paying the taxes and we're not paying the taxes out of the airport.
That's correct. Those were the three items that made the large variance.
That answers my question. And I guess in finance administration, we were over budget by 70,000. Is that lawyer fees primarily?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay, just for future reference to all directors, that's the kind of question that I would prefer that we hold until the committee reports, standing committees come up, and you can ask the staff at that time. I appreciate that. Any questions, any other on department questions? Okay, let's move on to standing committee reports. And again, I would like you each to limit your questions to 3 minutes per topic and try to ask questions that are not covered by the minutes. So let's start with Budget and Finance. Director Leffel, will you take that, please?
Muted, Marianne.
We basically spent the bulk of the time talking about the ASIP and the different parts and how that would all work together before we approved it from the committee. And we also did spend some time talking about a delinquent tenant, which I was hoping we could get an update on today, J&J Auto. Do we have any update?
No update at this point. Still waiting for their response on getting the government grant.
Okay, so they are under a quit? What are they under? We've sent them a notice, correct?
They're under pay or quit. So they have a limited window within which to facilitate repayment. Will be flexible, as I said, in finance, will be flexible if they are making progress towards the PPP loan.
Okay, and what is their timing on the quit? If it's,
I believe they have 20 more days or something in that neighborhood. It was 30 when we issued it.
Okay, just so everybody's aware that we are paying attention to accounts receivable. So that's what I have. We went over the variance report. One of the items that came up was what Director Sabo just inquired about. We had the same inquiry. But basically, we're being made whole by the CARES Act, so we'll keep moving along. Gary, that's me.
Great, thank you. The only thing I would add is that the finances are stable and they're a positive picture right now. So fingers crossed, we have to just keep moving forward till we get out of the mess that we're in. We actually had 189 flights versus 157 budgeted, good news. And so all in all, it's a pretty good picture. Director Sabo.
Yeah, just a quick question of the committee. I noticed that we have the art expense was down $10,000 from budget. Have we eliminated the art program for the airport? Did the committee approve that?
We have not. The art program is still in existence. We just have delayed the replacement, which would impact the cost.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for finance? I've got nobody's picture. I need to have either the pictures up or the hands up, one of the two. Can't go without that. So, okay, seeing none, let's move on to air service and community relations. Director Sabo, would you like to start off or would you like to have Director Soni start off?
Director Soni can go ahead and talk. Most everything that we covered was reflected in the minutes and the amended minutes.
Great. Director Soni?
I agree. So I'm a little confused because we are getting the new meeting minutes now. I'm just supposed to give just a brief overview of what was discussed.
So this is the report from the last Air Services Committee meeting.
Right. So
you were on Air Services at the point of this meeting.
Correct. And we had the minutes in the packet. So that's changed since we've been meeting later. But the big news was Portland. It has been announced. I think we discussed that for some time. And then also Seattle obviously is coming up in February for us for new service. Seattle was lagging as far as some of the flights or for not appointments, what do you call it, bookings for a flight. So obviously that's probably largely due to COVID and what we're dealing with here on the county. United had no flights to Denver this last month, and hopefully that will come back. And otherwise, I think that was pretty much what we discussed. And then we did discuss the noise. We had updates that Bill already discussed with the noise abatement for the area.
So executive director, I believe that you did tell us that we have a date when Denver will be back. Is that accurate?
Denver is back toward the end of February. I believe that date is the 28th of February. I have to confirm that, but it's toward the end of February.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions for Air Service? Seeing none, we'll move to property development and leases. Directors Luffel and Miller, whoever would like to take it away.
Go ahead, Carl.
Mary Ann, you want to do it? Hey, that we pass that hot potato back and forth. You know, really, we didn't have a lot to talk about. Of course, we're not involved in any new projects at this time. Sort of where we are. Mike, you said that we have gone out to bid for the demolishing of the building. What's the status on that?
No, we have not. We are going to go to bid. We have not gone out yet. We have bids from previously, but we will go out, refresh those bids, and we'll move toward the demolition of that building.
And the timeline on that is?
We'll probably be out for bid for demolition in the next couple of weeks, and we'll bring that back. I would bet probably sometime in the March timeframe.
Like Mary Ann, I don't really remember anything else other than what was in the note.
Yeah, I think we talked about, principally we talked about past due balance and actions related to that.
Director Luffel, anything additional?
No, I have nothing.
Any questions for Lise? So, Scott, I have a question for you on point of order. I noticed there's no public left attending the meeting. That being said, is it still required that I call for public comment, or when we know there is no public, we don't have to call for public comment?
Well, I would still do it because when these things are recorded, my recollection is, and I've only looked at one of them, my recollection is that the participant list does not show up on the recording. So you don't have a record of panelists versus attendees and were there any attendees or not. So I would just do it, say, okay, any questions from the public? Seeing none, let's move on and just do that. Okay, very good. At this point, is there any questions from the public? Seeing none, we'll move on to the ad hoc committees. Let's start with the local jurisdictions, Directors Luffel and Miller. Anything?
We did not have a meeting.
No one wants to talk to us.
That's understandable. Liaison representatives, Director Luffel, LAFCO?
LAFCO did not meet, and the staff is working diligently with the water district to work on the parameters of what LAFCO will require for them to submit an application. So I think that's probably the biggest piece. There's also the Soledad piece for annexation, which goes back and forth of whether or not they have given enough information. And FORA, the staff has pretty much given that to the county. The county's trying to unravel some of the financial pieces and determine where did the money go at the end, who's got it, and what they're doing with it. So LAFCO cannot formally vote to dissolve LAFCO until that's resolved. But that portion, the financial fiscal portion, was given to the county. And I understand they're having some issues with it. So we'll just sit tight and see what happens.
Very good. Director Sabo.
Yeah, I have a question for Mary Ann, our LAFCO representative. At the special districts meeting last night, Kate McKenna indicated that LAFCO was going to initiate a study to examine the sphere of influence of the special districts. I'm not sure exactly what that means and what are the implications of that for the airport district.
So and I had not heard that before, Bill, so it was a little surprise to me as one of the 7 commissioners. But what evidently LAFCO is doing, and it's kind of a movement statewide, is to look at the municipalities and see what municipal services they have and what they're providing and what overlaps. And it's a way to start looking at the cities, encouraging them to combine departments so that they can reduce cost. So what she said last night was that they are going to start with the 7 cities on the peninsula and do a complete study of all of the municipal services that are being offered by each city, and what duplicative efforts there are with either districts in their boundaries or with other cities.
Okay. All right. Do they plan to look at special districts in addition to municipalities?
Say that again?
Do they intend to analyze special districts in addition to the municipalities?
No, it's just municipalities and the services that they offer. So Parks and Rec, fire, police, that sort of thing. They're just looking statewide. I think everybody's starting to look at how you can consolidate and make a difference.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Director Leffel, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Is there any proposed timeline on the water district issue?
No, last February or March, Mr. Stoll came before us and said that we would have it all done by June. And then the next one was September, and LAFCO has still not received an application. There is no application in, which is what will start the clock. So I have no idea.
Okay, I appreciate that. Keep us posted. It's an interesting topic.
Yes, it is.
Regional taxi, there was no meeting. Bill, TAMC, anything?
No meeting.
Okay, Bill, but I have a question. I should have asked you last time around, and I failed to do that. I believe I know this, but I wanted to confirm it. Is it accurate that as of now, because of a fairly recent $20 million grant, the Castroville interchange improvements are fully funded at this time?
I can't speak to whether they're fully funded, but they are substantially funded, and I haven't seen any, heard anything from the TAMC staff that said they're out looking for more money. So I think that Castroville interchange is pretty well funded.
Okay. Any idea of the are they back to work on it? I know they had stopped because they had some environmental issues. Are they back to work on it?
I can't speak to that.
Okay. Thank you.
Gary, if I might, I had a discussion with a TAMC employee last week, and they still have to secure some rights of way out there. They do not have all the right of ways. And they also are doing some more, they have to do a little more environmental. So as far as construction, it's my understanding it will not start till about 23.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you. Special districts, Director Miller, or anything?
We had a great meeting last night. It was well attended by 4 of our board members. Also,
and half the Democratic Party.
Yeah, one of the presentees, Mr. Riley, invited a bunch of his friends to come and participate. Crowd of people there. In the state by our Assemblyman Mark Stone. That was very informative. And then Mr. Riley's meeting was about a public banking option, which is now being allowed in California. This will be the place where we could put our reserves and it will be used to fund public works or community-based projects. I don't know if I'd be too crazy about putting our money into that bank, but the discussions will continue.
Very good. Director Sabo, do you have a question?
No, I guess I just forgot to lower my hand. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Executive Director Lapierre, anything on AMBAG?
Met last week, two principal topics of discussion. They received the annual audit CAFR, and it came back very well. No exceptions, no extraordinary or significant deficiencies. They also, Caltrans also introduced a topic called the US 101 business plan, and it's ostensibly a business plan for US 101 corridor from the South County to the north end of the county. When you say business plan, it is really positioning, looking at all of the modes of transportation and positioning those so that they are more eligible for funding. It is not a traditional business plan where you're talking about what kind of businesses was located in an area. It is a funding, it's a positioning plan or a strategy for funding for improvements on the 101 corridor. That will be led by TAMC, the stakeholders along the corridor, and Caltrans, and there will be more coming on that. That would be it.
Any questions for Mr. Lapierre? Seeing none, I'll ask once again, are there any questions from the public? Okay, moving on, we'll go to item 10, pending requests for future agenda items. And just a reminder to our board members, the bringing on of requests for future agenda items require a second to be put onto the agenda. So just want to keep that in mind. Any requests at this time?
Gary, I think we were going to have an update on the progress that our consultant is making on the financing of our capital improvement projects. And I thought we were going to have that at the end of January. Where are we on that?
Their work schedule has them finishing by the end of January. Presentation may be at the February meeting, depending on the work product.
So it'll come to finance for February if they're done, or March?
Yeah, correct.
So I'm going to ask that be on for the board for February if they can get their work done.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay. Roll call vote, Amanda?
Dr. Soni?
Yes.
Dr. Leffel?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Dr. Miller?
Carl, are yours still up? Unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
And yes, for the last question.
Here, Curcio.
Yes. Motion carries. Please see that that's added to the agenda. And lastly, are there any...
Chairman, I have a question.
Yes.
On the items, I can't find the page right now, but on the items that were pending agenda items from previous sessions, are those going to be on the next agenda or what?
The items that were placed on the pending requests from last month were all accomplished at this meeting. So we've cleared that item. We've cleared those items.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
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 Sure, we're all in favor. So you have to take a roll call on this. Go ahead, Amanda. Go ahead.
Aye.
Goodbye.
Aye.
Aye.